All right, welcome everyone to Radiator Comics Studio. Tonight's program is an installment of our Nuts and Bolts series in which cartoonists who have a connection to South Florida talk about their practical approach to various aspects of making comics. This week we're talking about penciling with Remus Jackson, Mar Julia, and Estrella Vega. My name is Neil Brideau. My pronouns are he, him, his. I run Radiator Comics, which distributes handmade and small press comic books, zines, and graphic novels. Radiator Comics Studio is a series of programs and publications that we're producing to support and grow the community of cartoonists here in South Florida. The program is made possible with the support of the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. We're grateful for their support, as well as the support of Oolite Arts and the Miami Foundation. So Radiator Comics Studio is intended to be a venue for South Florida residents who are making comics, who are interested in making comics, who are interested in learning about comics, regardless of their experience level, to come together and grow our community and to connect to the national comics scene. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge the land we live and create on in South Florida and acknowledge the indigenous people who have been and continue to be caretakers of this land. In South Florida, we live on land of the Miccosukee and Seminole tribes. The Tequesta were also caretakers here for a couple thousand years. It's also important in South Florida to recognize the labor of African American, Bahamian, and Haitian people in building the area. We live on stolen land, and the labor we benefit from is stolen labor. Acknowledging the land and its caretakers and the violence that we benefit from is one step towards justice, as is learning about the whole history where we live. So I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and I want to thank our presenters for tonight's conversation about penciling. This is really exciting. Penciling is one of my favorite things to do. And it can be kind of like this hidden part of cartooning because so often it's inked over. But tonight we'll get to see some different approaches to penciling, whether the cartoonists ink over those pencils or if they use the pencil work as the final art. Just a disclaimer, some content in this presentation might not be appropriate for all ages. I'm going to introduce the speakers in the order in which they're presenting tonight, and then I'm going to turn the presentations over to them. Oops. All right, so our first presenter will be Remus Jackson. Remus is a genderqueer cartoonist and PhD student in English at the University of Florida. Their work explores trans and disabled embodiment and desire. Their comic See Me was awarded a 2019 Prism Award for Best Short Form Comic. They also co-host the wonderful comics podcast, Drawing a Dialogue. So welcome, Remus. After Remus, Mar Julia will be presenting. Mar Julia is an Ignatz Award nominated cartoonist and illustrator from Palm Beach County, Florida, who currently lives in Providence, Rhode Island. Their personal work focuses on magical realism, close personal interactions, and the ways in which we often misunderstand each other. Currently, they're working on their first graphic novel in collaboration with Samuel Tier, which is coming out from Versify in 2022. And our final presenter will be Estrella Vega. Estrella is a graphic designer by day and a person who draws by night. She has been making illustrated books for over 10 years. She transitioned to a completely digital workflow about 3 years ago, but still likes translating her work to silkscreen. So welcome all three of our presenters. And we are now going to turn things over to Remus.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Remus. I'm going to share my screen because I have some slides I wanted to show. Also, my Wi-Fi is a little spotty, so if I start to dip out, just tap me in the chat and I will repeat myself, but let me go ahead.
Looks like maybe Remus is frozen. Let's see if maybe stopping the sharing will work. Let's see, is Remus here? Looks like maybe Remus stepped out, and yeah, as soon as they said it, they froze. So maybe we'll switch over to Mar, or should we just wait for? Oh,
Hey,
you're back. Okay.
I was just saying my Wi-Fi. Okay, so let me try if you can maybe skip me and I'll switch to my phone. Can y'all still hear me?
Okay. Yes, you cut in a little bit, but
yeah, it's I have a shared Wi-Fi and it's moving times, so it's just a nightmare. All right, can y'all see my screen?
yes.
Cool. All right. So what I was saying was I was excited for this one because penciling is actually sort of my like go-to. I don't often work entirely traditionally, but when I do, I prefer to work in just graphite. And even when I work digitally, I prefer to like emulate graphite. So I'm wildly inconsistent. I do things in entirely digital. I do things digital and then go over them in pencil. And sometimes I just work in straight pencil. So I wanted to sort of share all these different approaches, starting with the more traditional, I think, sort of what we think of when we think of penciling, which is sort of that invisible sketch layer that Neil was talking about, right? So this is a pitch page from a graphic novel pitch. So I started with just thumbs on paper, and then I just blow those up and go into Procreate, which is a iPad program. And I like Procreate because it's the only digital program I know that like works for me that actually kind of feels like pencil, because I have like a screen protector that kind of emulates paper, and the brushes actually layer in a way that's very similar to pencil, which is what I like about graphite. So then you can sort of see I go from sort of these thumbs, which are usually on paper. I think these ones are actually digital, straight to sort of a sketch. And then I just wanted to show how that sort of like goes into the final sketch. So this is like a trick for me to differentiate between pencils and inks, right? Because to me, it's all kind of like pencil-y. I'm just digitally working in layers, but trying to keep a very like layered pencil feeling with a texture. But this is just, like I said, I'm pretty inconsistent, and this is just sort of one. But what I really wanted to talk about was actually the book that Neil mentioned, See Me, because that one was actually done entirely in pencil. And I flipped it, because what I did was I started with thumbs on paper. So I have an example of my thumbs. And my when I say thumbs, for those who might not know, I mean like generally pretty small sketches, just to kind of figure out like where things go, right? And then I took those and I scanned them in and drew over them on the iPad bigger, so that I could get it to the size I wanted, right? And then I printed that out and drew over that in pencil. And I did that because, you know, the issue with drawing on paper sometimes is that if you're scaling up from thumbs, it's hard to like, you have to kind of start over from scratch. I know some folks who like blow up their thumbs on copy machines, but I don't have a copy machine. So using Procreate is kind of my cheat to like get it to the size I want, and then I can go back to graphite. So for this one, I actually did it in 2 layers, where I had sort of the graphite layer with the main lines, and then the texture stuff underneath, because I wanted to be able to put it together, and it was going to be risographed. so this was probably the most fun I've had drawing a book, and I definitely want to like do the technique again. For the pitch, the reason I'm doing that book in totally digital is because it's very long, right? Because it's going to be hopefully a graphic novel. And I have found that I can't work in pencil for super long books because I'm too disorganized, and I'll start to lose things. Let me see. And so I have to sort of, for smaller books, like this book was only like 16 pages. For smaller things, I prefer to work like that. And then for longer things, I have to stick with the digital because it's just how my brain works. And then I also wanted to show what that looked like. So the again, sort of the sketched layer, the pencils I did in digitally, right? And then the pencils I did traditionally, which was actually sort of the finished layer, and then the final risographed. And a risograph is sort of like a copy machine that does silkscreen. And I like it because it kind of keeps that weird texture that pencil has, which is sort of my whole deal. And then I wanted to end by sort of, so that's sort of like, again, I'm pretty inconsistent, so I don't have like a one and done process. And there's sort of pros and cons for that. I like being experimental. I like kind of approaching different projects in different ways. Because I feel like if I like get too stuck on one particular way, I might like miss something that works better for a different project, right? And I have had to like stop and redraw things and like redraw entire pages because I'll be working on it and realize like, oh, that doesn't work for me anymore. So I wanted to also share these, which are from this these little zines I do, which I call the Jughead zines. Let me check that I'm not frozen. Yes. And these are done entirely in pencil, and I actually don't do any thumbs or anything for them. So the way, because these are zines, so to me, they're much more like quick, disposable, not super serious. From the content also, like they're about Riverdale's Archie, so like not super serious. So I generally sort of write a quick script for myself and maybe make some notes for like ideas in my head. And then I just go straight like 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, pencil, just straight into it and just layer it and don't think super hard about that. So that's sort of like 3 different techniques. Like I said, penciling is like an interesting thing for me because even for those very like finished digital things, I still consider that sort of pencil work in a digital way. And it's interesting. I wanted to sort of share all those different techniques because for me, it's like, I know some folks, you know, you have to kind of think about what works best for your brain, right? Like whether you're a person that wants to do the very traditional, like thumbed sketch to sort of polished ink, or if you want to sort of stop somewhere in the middle, or if it just sort of depends on what you're working on. I'm super inspired by like pencil comics. I tend to like obsessively buy pencil comics. So yeah, I just wanted to share all that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass it back to Neil now.
Great. Thanks so much, Remus. That was fantastic. I love this like expansive philosophy of what constitutes a pencil and like how, you know, sort of final pencils can be. Cool. So we're gonna move on to Julia now. I'm unmuting Mar.
Hi. I also have some slides to show while I talk, just so that's not just like me. So I'm gonna share my screen for that now. And stuff. Okay, so I'm going to kind of describe like how I make my work first, and then I'll like describe my thought process for pencils. I'm much more like traditional than Remus possibly, but I still like have a very vague way of penciling, I think, compared to some people. But so I work entirely digitally. It is mostly for efficiency and for, you know, when you could travel and go places, it was an easy way for me to kind of like make sure that I could do my work if like my family in Florida wanted me to visit for 2 weeks or something, right? So I do all of my work on a 13-inch Cintiq Pro from Wacom. If you don't know what those are, the Wacom tablets, the Wacom tablets are basically like dual monitor drawing tablets where you draw on the screen and you put them into your computer. So they come in like 13-inch and then go all the way up to like the 27-inch big, huge ones that you see in like animation drawing studios. But I like the 13-inch one because it's like nice and small and portable. And then I just work in Photoshop. I do everything in Photoshop except thumbnailing. I still do that traditionally because I kind of like, I do them very, very small. It's like basically laying out the comic page, how many panels I want and like what I want in each of them. I do them very, very small and kind of messy. So it is easier for me to do that on a like traditional kind of like flipping paper. It's like about the feel. I don't know. So usually how I make my work is I do a thumbnail and then I will just bring it into Photoshop into the file that I'm using, and I will blow it up much like Rebus does and just use it as a guide for my pencils. So sometimes the thumbnail changes, I'll play with it, I'll redraw things, I'll just like lasso and move things. It's more of a guide for my pencils anyway. And the like pencils that I am showing you now are kind of like the tightest that my pencils get for a couple of reasons. So I do a lot of freelance. Right now I'm drawing a graphic novel, and this is actually from the pitch packet for the graphic novel. So this was like pitch pages. When I need to draw something that is like shown to other people for editing, for consistency checks, or just general, like other people are seeing it, I tend to be tighter and more specific in my drawings, because for me, I don't actually like to overdraw my like pencil layers, because when I ink on top of it, I feel like I lose like life out of it and like spontaneity and like interest. But there are times like buildings and cars and stuff where I try to be more specific so that I have an easier time when it comes to inking. So like this is also from pitch pages, and the pencils on one side and the inks are on the other. And you can kind of see they don't change very much because the pencils are very tight. And again, it's because I have to show it to other people. But what I go for when I am penciling is less about how I want the final image to look and more about where I want things. So like I approach my pencils from like, I'm thinking less about how I want these lines or this drawing or this form to be, and more about blocking in composition, what I want in the foreground, middle ground, how I want the panels to be laid out, what I want to be in each of them. And it's more about like page structure for me. Oftentimes I'll do a page and I'll realize that I want this panel to be 2 panels, and like I'll redo it. And for me, that comes easier at like penciling stage than at thumbnail stage sometimes. Like it's just sometimes you realize that you want something else. So those are examples of like really tight penciling, stuff I had to give to other people. This is from a project that I did for myself. It's much messier. It's a part of an anthology that is coming out later. And I basically like didn't plan on a bunch of things that ended up being true about the final image. But like the one thing I had in mind for this page for like the top half was like the Yamaya figure was like the central part. And then I didn't block in the background because it depended on how I drew the final figure. And I knew that. So I just kind of glossed over it. And my penciling philosophy is like being as vague as possible, but like just getting the idea of what I want down. Like it's more about the idea and the composition and the page flow than it is any sort of final drawing or like realized figure, basically. And these are just more examples of that. These are from a personal project of mine that's kind of like on the way back burner now that I started. And you can see some drawings are very, very vague. So yeah, that's just kind of the like way that I approach inking, the mentality that I approach inking with. I'm thinking about composition and what it works. Do I need this here? Do I want this here? What do I want to focus on? And then everything else for me is part of inking. You can tell that like some things on these pages are really vague, like instruments and stuff. Sometimes when it doesn't need to be readable, like the first couple pages that I showed, I will just block out the shapes, and then I will go in, and if I need to refine them for my inking, I'll do that as a part of my inking like time, because I don't want to bog myself down with like worrying about how many dials are on a guitar while I'm penciling, if that makes sense. It's kind of like what Remus was talking about, figuring out a workflow that works for you. And when I kind of like stress too much about the nitty gritty of, you know, a fabric pattern or what I want like the balloon shine to be or something, it doesn't help me. It doesn't go anywhere, and it's not really what I want out of my penciling process. So yeah, I think that's it. I don't know if I have anything else. Oh, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen then.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mar. I love this idea of like pencils as a design tool.
Yeah, it's very much
anything
about
else.
that for me.
That's really great. Cool. Thanks again. And now we are going to switch over to Estrella for the final presentation. Oops.
Hi, can you hear me?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I wrote down what I was gonna say because I was afraid that my mind would go blank. So I might be looking down while I'm doing this. Let me share my screen because I also have a presentation. So share screen. Share. Okay, so so here's some info about me. I've never gone to art school, and I sort of have like I feel like I have an imposter syndrome because of it, because I feel like I haven't learned a lot of techniques on how to draw. So I feel like in a lot of ways I've had to figure stuff out on my own. So I didn't go to art school, but the thing is that my parents actually wanted me to actually be a doctor. And I didn't want to be a doctor because I didn't want to be like around sick people. So I decided like my compromise was to be a graphic designer. And so once I started my career, I moved to New York. And in New York, that's when I started taking courses at the School of Visual Arts in the continuing education program. And through the School of Visual Arts, like I sort of gained more confidence in my artwork, and I gained confidence to start making my own books. So what I'm going to show you are some of the cheats I figured out how to draw, how to pencil. So my artistic inspiration is semi-realistic. And so to be able to achieve that look, I had to get a lot of photo references. So I'm going to tell you how I get these references. So like I just showed you like some of the artists that I usually look up to try to like guide me. And so these are my tools that I use. So the Wacom Cintiq, I have like 27-inch, my laptop and the stylus. So this I got the Wacom Cintiq about, I think about 5 years ago. It's a very expensive piece of equipment. It's about $2,000. So I really had to like save up money for it. But prior to that, I used these tools, my analog tools. I had a light table. The mechanical pencil is best, I think, because you don't have to like sharpen it all the time. Like you never run out of the pencil, which is nice. I use photo blue pencil because I feel like with the photo blue pencil, I was like, I could make more mistakes. I didn't have to feel bad about making mistakes while drawing. And then I used a Bristol paper to draw. And so the light table was useful to transfer my really dirty drawings to a cleaner sheet of paper. So that's what I used. And so usually what I do when I start out, I make the thumbnails in my sketchbook. And then I transferred that to Photoshop, which is what I use because I'm a graphic designer, so that's the software that I'm familiar with. So then I just draw these very rough drawings on Photoshop, and they don't really make sense to anybody except me. You know, like I just write the text, so I know sort of what scene is supposed to be happening, even though the drawings are very crappy. So in terms of getting reference, so I take a lot of pictures. I take a lot of pictures on my phone. So these are like chicks that I found at the county fair a couple of years ago, and so I saw them like, hey, there could be like useful inspiration because I'm drawing this book series on prehistoric life. So I had to draw dinosaurs, and I figured, well, these are pretty dinosaur looking. I mean, they're descended from dinosaurs, so I might as well take pictures to get inspiration in terms of like how to pose the dinosaurs I have to draw. So I have tons of pictures that I try to like organize in my iPhoto with like folders, like so it's easier to pull reference from. And then in terms of like human figures, I actually, so I started collecting all these figures to draw from. I don't know why I started because they're actually pretty expensive. So these are like all the different figures that I have. Like if you're interested in buying one, I would get the Body Kun one because it's the cheapest one. The other ones are about in the $100 to $200 range. And it's the cheapest one. It has pretty good proportions. The only thing is you need like, it doesn't really have a head, like a face, whereas the Hot Toys and the Fison one, well, the Fison one doesn't have a face either. You have to buy that separately. Anyway, so I found that you can actually buy head sculpts on eBay for very cheap, 1/6 head sculpts. So I bought several like different genders, like different ages, different race, just as a reference. And then I also have these books that you can actually buy them on animebooks.com. I found that there aren't a lot of American published books that are that can be used as reference for artists. However, the Japanese, they have a lot of photo book references. So I usually buy these at animebooks.com at the reference book section. So they have like a lot of different variety of things. There we go. So this one has like fighting poses and different things. And then I also pull reference from Getty or just Google search images. So then putting it all together. So here I took a video of myself making, penciling a comic page. I did this on Procreate because I can easily video myself. So it's a time lapse and it's very quick. Let's see. So I usually start by like fading everything back. So the cool thing about working digitally is that you can always, it's much easier to fix mistakes. Like obviously when you're working with the pencil and the paper and you have to erase your mistakes, eventually the paper gets used. So at least with the digital, you don't have to worry about your paper becoming mangled with the erasing. So here I'm going with I'm going over with details. Like it's various layers of drawing and drawing and drawing to try to get something right. So yeah, it's like 2 minutes. So yeah, so for instance, the hands, I got these as photo references on Getty. In terms of the figures, like the head, some of the angles, I used my the head sculpts that I have in terms of like reference for the angles. A lot of the bodies I just drew from memory because I feel like I've drawn enough people where I sort of get anatomy now. And then also the building I also use photo reference for that. So yeah, I don't know. That's all I have to say. We still have like 1 minute left of the movie there. Let's see to the end. And so it depends. Usually, sometimes I keep my pencils fairly rough and ink over it, it being rough, but sometimes just better if I just try to like tighten my pencil as much as possible, because well, I just basically if I'm using loose pencils, it's just because I'm being lazy. Basically what it is. So I try to like put more effort in my pencils to try to clean them up so I don't have to guess as much and while I'm inking. So that's about it. Yeah. So.
Cool. Thanks so much, Estrella.
Thanks.
I love that. I love the like jump between like Mars' presentation of like that idea of being as loose as possible, and then like you're like you want to get it as like precise as possible to like not then have to like worry about it
Yeah.
on the other end, on the inking side. So that was great. So we have time, about half an hour for questions, and it looks like we have one question already in the chat from Jeannie asking, do any of you draw from the figure in drawing groups?
Me?
Yeah, Estrella, if you want to start, then.
Sure. So currently no, but I've taken a lot of classes, figure drawing classes, especially it was easier in New York. Like here in Miami, I'm not really sure about how many artistic resources there are, but in New York, like, so there were a lot of different places you could go to do figure drawing where you didn't have to be enrolled in the class. And then there was also the Art Student League. So I enrolled to like two courses that were last like every day for a month, drawing from the model. So that's sort of like, it helped me memorize the human figure.
Cool. Mar or Remus?
Kind of a similar answer. I don't do as much figure drawing as like I used to when I was a student or anything. I went to SVA, but I didn't get my degree, so I like did 3 years and then didn't finish. But I did a lot of figure drawing in high school and in college. It's something that like I would like go to a figure drawing class now if I had time and it wasn't a pandemic. Like it's fun for me, but I don't like actively do it as much as it when I was a student anymore.
Yes, basically same. When I was a student, we had to do like drawing. The only real, I don't really do it anymore. The only thing I do is if, and this is obviously pre-pandemic, when I go to like concerts, like to, or even like poetry readings or really anything like that where there's like people on a stage, I really like to draw them. So I usually try to bring a sketchbook and like do really fast like gesture drawings, but that's like the most I do, and that's not like a formal thing.
One thing that might be nice to do if you're someone who misses a figure drawing or like a life drawing session is I have a lot of friends who will take like dance videos on YouTube and draw poses like frame by frame. So like you get kind of that like you can do like 30-second or 1 minute gestures if you want that like kind of active but still flowy like quick kind of figure drawing feel, or it's less figure drawing-y, but doing studies from movies for like composition and figure is really nice.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Cool. So we'll do one question in the chat and then somebody has their hand raised. So this is from Kathy for Remus, but anyone can answer. Why is your approach to different projects always inconsistent? Mike could have been worded a little friendlier.
No, Kathy knows me. I also said that I'm inconsistent. have a bad brain is the honest answer. But the other honest answer is I'm still in the process of really trying to like unlearn. I was like sort of trained in that I went to like a very traditional art program, and I was sort of trained in a very like rigid approach to illustration. And it's not really good for how I think. So I'm still in the process of trying to like unlearn that, especially like the idea that things to be like a certain level of like polish to be good. So a lot of it is like throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall and just trying to figure out what works. And also like the vibe of the comic is like, I knew for See Me, I wanted it to feel like really layered and really dense. And I wanted to kind of play with like layering sheets of paper to kind of get that effect, especially because I knew it was going to be risographed in the end. That's sort of the honest answer, is because I'm still figuring out a lot of stuff, and also because I like to experiment, but I don't necessarily know if it's like a good or bad.
So we have a hand raised, so I'm gonna unmute. Is it Chica?
Yeah.
Welcome.
And oh, hi, thank you. And my question was directed over at Mar. So like your line art is like gorgeous. I just love the movement and like the looseness in it. And I guess the problem that I have a lot of the time when I'm lining is I feel like between sketch and between lining, I tend to lose that movement or like that looseness. Like I thought it was just me not knowing how to line, but even with the friend, like they were trying to go ahead and they were trying to line my sketch, and they're like, oh Chica, like your like work or your art is so dependent like on the movement of like your sketches. I don't know how to line it without losing it like in lining. So I just wanted to ask, how do you like maintain that looseness when you go from again sketching and penciling to lining? Is it like what you were saying again with like seeing it more like compositionally and kind of like more mapping it out and kind of lining, or not working too much, overworking in the sketching or penciling stage and doing it more so in the inking?
Yeah, so that is definitely something that helps me. I find that when I kind of overdraw my pencils, my line art does get stiff and I don't like it as much. The other thing that I kind of taught myself to do is that if you draw a line while you're inking and you don't like it, just Control Z it or erase it. Like, don't try to fix it, just get rid of it. Like, you can do it again. You drew it once, you can do it again. And like, I'll just draw the same line like 3 or 4 times sometimes to like get it like the way that I want. Sometimes I draw lines very quickly because like that's how you kind of get that like smooth like feel of motion. And if it helps you because you're someone who like has a lot of sketches that feel a lot like more fluid than your inking. When I was younger, I would do a lot of just like straight ink drawings or like colored pencil because you can't erase it, drawings on like paper and in my sketchbook and stuff. And that kind of helped me get a feel for like what I wanted my like fluid lines to feel like without kind of being like, oh, this is just a sketch, I'll fix it later. Like, you know, does that help?
Yeah, no, that totally helps. I'm like in the past when I've done like lining or I guess drawing, mainly like in pen and things like that, because I don't really have to like worry about lining it over like a sketch. I notice that it tends to like have that kind of fluidity and things like
Yeah.
that. So yeah, like I get what you're saying. So sorry, my mind is
No,
like
no.
blanked for a second.
No, that's totally like, I had that problem when I was younger too. It's definitely just about figuring out like your process. Like if you want something to have that feeling of motion, maybe try pulling back on your sketch, like relying on your inking skills more because you can obviously do it. It's in the sketch, right? But just like I said, if you feel like you're overworking a drawing, just like redo that part. Just start, like if you can, like just start over. Like sometimes I will, if I don't like how a drawing is turning out, or I think I want to change something in Photoshop, I will duplicate the layer, turn off the original one, and change whatever it was and see if it's better. So that way I don't lose my original work and I can see if my like inkling was right.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good idea. So okay
Yeah.
then. Yeah. But thank you so much for your feedback and your answer.
Cool.
Sorry, I had myself muted. Thank you, Chica, for that question. So we have a question in the chat from Joe Crawford asking, all three of you seem to start with thumbnails in the writing process. Do you ever start with a more formal script with stage direction as if, so does that, if so, does that change your process?
I'll start.
I just went.
So usually I don't start with a script. I feel like, especially with all of my friends that I know who also do comics and books, we all, because we're all artists, we all start with the visual first and then the writing later. I've tried it a couple times. I've never written like formal scripts with like panel 1, do this, panel 2, do this. Like I've tried it, but it just feels very inorganic to me. The other option I've done is actually written an actual story and then break that down into comic pages. So that's the two ways that I've approached it. Either I write a story and then break it down into a comic, or either I just start like with the thumbnails first and then try to come up with the dialogue after.
Yeah, so like I am kind of similar. So when I'm doing shorter work, it's really loose. I kind of just write, I take notes and I write what I want to happen. If there's like a specific line of dialogue that like I think I want, I'll write it down. But it's kind of like page by page beats rather than like panel 1, panel 2, you know, in the left on the right. So when I'm doing longer work, that's kind of expanded. So like I have outlines, I know what scenes I want, what to happen where, but it's actually very hard for me, like Estrella was saying, to do like a formal script without doing thumbnails. So like if I have to do a formal script, I'll often do thumbnails at the same time, because that for me is the part of the process where I go, oh, I want this dialogue in this panel on this page. It's just like I can't decide what I want where until I decide where I want it, like visually, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I actually talked about this a little bit in the story and development panel, which was recorded, so I won't go super long, but similarly, writing actually sort of a weakness of mine. So I usually, for shorter things, I will either like kind of just do thumbs and like dialogue notes for myself, or like just kind of jot down like a very short outline. And then for longer stuff, for example, like this pitch I'm working on, which has to be seen by other people, so it needs to have sort of a written component. Again, sort of not like a beat panel per panel, but sort of just a broad, like on this page, this stuff, and then on this page of this stuff, just to sort of keep track. But it does have to be like super heavily visual.
Cool. We have another question in the chat from Danny asking, for all of y'all, you all seem to have so many different approaches to penciling. I would love to hear who are your influences in these approaches. And maybe Remus, if you'd be down with starting.
Sure.
Not to put you on the spot.
No, totally. I'm really influenced by other cartoonists who work in pencil and graphite. Actually, Kathy G. Johnson is one of my big influences. She's here. But also artists like Annie Mock, or like Carter Monier, who works in ink but still has like a very like loose, fluid style. That's the stuff that I'm like super interested in. Sunmi, again, who also does work in ink, but it's very like loose and fluid. And also a lot of like manga. A lot of manga has like a very Chihiro Saito, who drew Utena manga. The Beastars manga is another one where it's like super fluid, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for me, I guess like since I approach penciling from kind of a design point of view, I tend to think of comics and creators that I think I like, that do like, I like their layouts and I like their compositions and stuff. When I'm drawing a book, I tend to keep like comic books on my desk that I like for like whatever I'm doing at that time. So like one big one is Taiyo Matsumoto, who is a manga artist who drew Tech on Concrete and Sunny and a lot of big mangas. I really like Freddie Carrasco. He has published books with Piao, and his most recent one is called Gleam, I think. I really like how he draws in the negative space that he controls when he like lays things out. Is really nice. Another manga series that I have been keeping on my desk while I draw the graphic novel I'm working on is called Children of the Sea by Daisuke Igarashi. I have it like right there, so I was like making sure I got the name right. I really like the way that it's drawn, and I often just keep books like that around. I could name a bunch more, but I'll let Estrella go.
Well, so in terms of artistic influence, I'm not sure about penciling so much. I mean, I've bought some penciling books from like American superhero comic book creators just to see what their technique was like and see what I could learn from it. But in terms of like inspiration, like I said, I look at a lot of European comic book artists because I prefer their cleaner line work, whereas a lot of American superhero, they do a lot of they block out a lot of parts with black. There's all these black shadows, which I'm personally not crazy about. I prefer cleaner lines. And then also, like everybody else, the manga. In terms of manga, there's one that I saw. There's a manga that I saw recently that I really like was Levius. The artwork, the story, I'm not crazy about them. And yeah, and also I've also looked at Berserk for the line work, which is insane. So yeah, I try to like steal from left and right, basically. Yeah.
Cool. And Fareshta did in the chat suggest that if you wouldn't mind typing in some of those folks that you get influence from, that would be great. Thanks. And so then it looks like we had a question from, is it Apple?
Yes, it was. Sorry. That is me. Sorry, I'm just new to Zoom and everything's kind of wonky for me. But I sort of had two questions, but I wasn't sure if one was related directly to penciling or not. But my first question was, early on, did you ever get so stuck in thumbnailing just with the mindset that everything had to look right? Or what do you do to get out of the mindset of making all your drawings look good on the first try and just trying to get more loose and expressive in that stage of creativity? And my second question was, which I'm not sure it relates directly to penciling, but I was concerned about it. When you've gotten offers for like more professional jobs, like say a graphic novel deal or something like that with a publisher, what factors came into play with that? Was it just as simple as having your work put out there on social media and they find you and they approach you with an offer, or what was that experience like for you?
Those are some great questions.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's great. Does anybody want to tackle the first question about not being too like careful with your thumbnails?
Yeah. So I was, I mean, I'm not very precious on like with the way I draw on purpose. But I was, when I took my first like comic class when I was 16, the teacher told me that you should always save room for the next step, right? So you should like, if that's why I don't like do super tight pencils, right? Because you always want to leave room for the next step to add in those details, and I just super internalized that. So I'm just not very precious with, because I've even like gone back and redrawn stuff to be looser because I feel like it's too tight. So
Yeah, I guess for me, my one thing I would say if you feel yourself being too precious with drawings is draw fast, draw a lot. Like take maybe time to like see what you can get done and like just stop. Like if you want to time yourself or something, do it. Just like draw fast, draw a lot. It's really just learning to stop, or learning how much you actually need, right? Because like my whole penciling approach is like being as vague as possible. And it's kind of this like trial and error over years of like learning what I actually need in the drawing to go off from later.
So for me, I never really, I sort of skip over the thumbnail part. Like I sort of go late in the beginning parts, honestly. So yeah, I mean, I'd rather get things down as quickly as possible and not really fuss over too much over the details. Like even the comic I finished like 3 years ago, I had finished the pencils, and then I showed it to one of my friends, and she's like, well, I don't understand this section, so I had to redraw everything because my thumb, like I didn't really like have my friends look at the thumbnails to like tell me if something made sense sequentially. So I don't really stress over thumbnails all that much, even though I probably should.
Cool. And then the question about, I guess, like sort of the pencil part of possibly like a professional career, of like how did you, you know, a number of you are working like on projects for other publishers. Like what was that process like to connect with the publishers?
So I am currently working on a graphic novel, and I've been doing freelance for about 4 years now. I did a lot of work for Boom Studios. So I did like Adventure Time comics and stuff for a while. And that's all work for hire, which is different than a book deal from like a publisher if you want to publish a graphic novel. For me, I don't know if there's kind of like a straight line that I could point to. Like, I do put my work online because I have gotten work from someone noticing something online, and then I get like a small job out of it, right? So my online presence probably definitely has something to do with it. I would say when it came down to going to like conventions or being online, going to conventions is probably more helpful. I have met a lot of people, and a lot of people have bought my work who then reached out to me later when I was like tabling at SPX or stuff like that. I first talked to someone from First Second like a couple months after the first show I did, which was Mocha in New York in like 2014. And like, I didn't get any work out of that, but like, I wasn't even freelancing then yet. I was really young, and I thought it was really cool that they just bought my comic and liked it enough to reach out to me and like say hi. So as far as like penciling for like the graphic novel I'm doing, the first like 3 slides that I showed were all pitch pages from the graphic novel that I'm doing. So it's just like what Remus was saying about their pitch packet, where it's kind of more readable, but I still want it to be a relatively quicker part of the like process, more of a design process.
I guess I'll go next. Well, my career is a graphic designer, so I'm not really into the getting published as an artist. However, I've had experience where people approach me because I table at comic book conventions. So that's how I've gotten my work noticed. And usually I find with a lot of publishers is that they like to see what you've done instead of taking a plunge on something they don't really know if they can. Like they want to see your work just to be sure that you can actually make the work, you know, that you're just not like some, you know, I don't want to say, but they don't want to take a plunge on something they don't know that's going to deliver. But for me, like, I mean, because I have a career already, I'm not really into looking for a publisher because I don't really want to deal with like editing myself from people telling me, oh, you shouldn't do that, that's not going to sell. You know, I don't want to really think about the commercial aspect of is my book going to sell. I'd rather just make my work and see if there's people out there are going to buy. So that's why I don't really search for that type of work.
Yeah, I mean, I've done some freelance, but it's not really something I'm interested in, so I've never tried to pursue it super hard. I am in the process of pitching, which basically means that it's like I'm not working with anyone on it. It's just my idea, and I have like a packet, like some sample pages and the whole thing laid out, and I have an agent who sort of handles the actual like handing it off to people. In terms of like in terms of like process and things like that, because I'm not like what I would be giving at this point, what I would be giving any company would be finished work. They don't really see the pencil work, so it's still just kind of for me. If it actually gets sold and I actually start working on it, then I would want to do stuff that's tighter, kind of in the way that Mar was talking about, where it's going to be seen by someone else. So you need to sort of make sure they can read it, but that's off in the future.
Okay, then. Well, I know I didn't have the best delivery for my questions, but that was really helpful. Thank you all so much.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Apple.
Cool.
So, and I wanted to see if any of our panelists have questions for each other, but I have a question, which has to do with the sort of like working digitally. I tend to work like fairly traditionally, like completely on paper. So for me, when I'm penciling, that's sort of like the next step before inking. And then when I ink, like those are the final lines. And you're all working digitally, and with the ability, like you said, Mar, to like, go back, to hit Control Z and just like start over. And we got a really great opportunity to see Estrella's drawings in action. And there was a lot of like really cool reworking. Like, how do you know when you're done, like when like the line is right? Like, is it just a feeling, or are you like, do you set a timer and say like, well, I need to like have this page done by a certain time, and so that's when it's over? Like, how do you stop yourself from just like constantly editing something that is like could be perpetually edited?
For me, it's like, so I used to do a lot of traditional inking. I think a lot of people just start that way. I did a lot of brush ink in college. Very first comic I ever drew that was like 12 pages and like a real readable mini comic was all brush inked, even the lettering, and it's just too slow. As far as like drawing digitally, it's just like, yeah, I draw until I like a line, and then maybe I'll come back to it later. As far as time constraints, I don't time myself, but I have schedules. So I know that I need to, like, my normal schedule is like ink 2 pages a day, right? So like I will try my very best to get near that. Sometimes I only do 1 because maybe it's a really complicated page, or it's like a double page spread or something, and that's basically 2. So it's like I usually just go by schedule and by like trial and error with like how I want my drawings to have looked and stuff. And as far as over editing, sometimes if I don't like a drawing, I just get up and I go get a snack, or I go to the bathroom, or I talk to my roommates. And when I come back, I realize I don't hate what I hated anymore. And that stops me from like changing stuff and doing stuff I don't need to do.
So for me, I also have trouble finding out when is the right time to stop. Sometimes I put too much detail in my drawings, but then I'm like, oh, whatever, it's just a style. But yeah, I mean, usually like Mara, I have a schedule and I try to like get things done. I mean, at the end of the day, like the way I look at it is like, it's better to put something out there than just be like trying to achieve perfection. It's just better just put something out there, even if it's not good. Mm-hmm. At least you put it out there, you cut it off of your chest, So, I mean, I look at a lot of, like, I wrote down the artists that I look up to, but there's other artists that I look up to because they do really bad drawings. They draw really bad. And it's sort of inspiring in a way. It's like, well, look at these guys. They draw even worse than I do, and they don't have any problem putting it out there. And so it's sort of like, it gives me courage to like keep on going, even if I don't like my drawings. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I have like a great answer for this, because I honestly think it's just practice and like getting comfortable with like what you want stuff to look like, because I mean, it's just a feeling. I'm just like, I'm done. If anything, I think I have the opposite problem, where sometimes I could probably stand to be a little more careful, but I'm very quick. So
Cool. Do any of y'all have questions for each other? This is the fun, awkward part where there's silence.
Mine is blank. I'm like stressed right now.
I mean, to pull back the curtain, me and Remus are very good friends. So I think any question I'd have for them, I've asked over the like 15 years I've known them. Remus and I both actually went to Dreyfus School of the Arts, which is a magnet high school in West Palm Beach.
yeah, in South Florida.
It's a lot like Dash in Miami.
Cool. Well, if there are no other questions, I think that this is a great place to end the conversation. Thank you so much, Remus, Estrella, and Mar for your presentations. Thanks for everybody else for joining us today. I am going to be pasting some links to our presenters in the chat. Please check out their websites. The anthology that Mar mentioned earlier, Mañana, which is edited by Jomet Gill, their Kickstarter will be launching soon, so be on the lookout for that. It's an anthology of speculative fiction. Our next online event is next week, June 21st. Cartoonist Kate Beaton and her spouse, novelist Morgan Murray, will be interviewed by Matthew Swanson and Robbie Baer. This is the first of several conversational events that we're organizing that connects South Florida to the national comics scene. So each of these new events will feature a different cartoonist as the host, running a panel or interview that they've designed. And then August's Nuts and Bolts and the more of the conversation events will be announced soon. And then every Friday we host a drop-in open studio work session from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern time for you to make time to work on your comics. All the information for that can be found at radiatorcomics.com/studio. I want to encourage you to get in touch if you want to be involved in any way with Radiator Comics Studio. We want to know who's making comics and who wants to make comics. We're always open for programming suggestions. My email address is neil@radiatorcomics.com. There's a contact form on our website, and you can find us on social media. So once again, thanks so much to Remus Jackson, Estrella Vega, and Mar Julia for your presentations. Thank you, everybody. Thanks and good night.
Okay.